The one thing that I can absolutely say I have learned in seeing thousands of clients and helping them to come out of negative conflict cycles and problematic communication is that most people do not identify the criticism in their own communication. They feel it very easily from their partner, but they don't understand how critical they come off as well. It's a lot more difficult to notice and accept that our own behavior is dysfunctional. It's easy to see what is wrong with our partner, but not always so easy to identify what we're doing incorrectly. So, again, it's time to take accountability and realize that the way that you've been communicating could be critical. And I don't know a single person on this earth that enjoys criticism and that finds it an effective way to change. It's important, again, to remember that you can't change or control anyone. And in fact, most people resist trying to be controlled. It was the great Bob Proctor who said, people don't resist change, they resist trying to be changed. And I have found that in my practice to be so very true. So, what if we focus all of our attention on how to change ourselves instead of how to change someone else through repeated criticism? Okay, so you might be thinking to yourself, hey, Dr. Hensley, that sounds all fantastic, but I have tried to ask nicely for my needs to be met. I have tried to ask nicely for things to be done to help me in this relationship. I have asked nicely for my partner to communicate with me during conflict, and they still don't do it. Okay, what I will say is the asking nicely was probably still too critical, especially for the dismissive avoidant and for the fearful avoidant who has a dismissive side that they lean into. Criticism is extremely triggering. Remember, dismissive avoidants have a defectiveness wound, and individuals that are fearful avoidant often want to be understood and accepted for who they are. And so criticism can really, really damage the relationship with these individuals because it's so triggering for them. Now, is it their responsibility to manage their triggers? Absolutely. But it is also your responsibility to be respectful and non critical in your communication with your partner. So, how do we ask for our needs to be met in a non critical way? Well, I always suggest if you can phrase something in the positive, you should phrase it in the positive. It's not always possible, but you should try. Let me give you an example. Let's say your partner really struggles to maintain connection during conflict. And one of the things they often do is shut down and leave the room and refuse to talk about the conflict. When everybody's a little more calmed down, you can ask for your need to have someone stay present in conflict in a way that is positive. You could say, hey, I really want you to know that when we have a conflict, I have a desire to hear you, understand you, and to not criticize you, and for us to work things out respectfully and kindly inside of this relationship. So it really makes me feel very safe and very loved and very supported and important to you when we stay present with each other when there's conflict, even when it's uncomfortable. And I'm curious how you feel about trying to implement that in an effective way inside our relationship. So I also want to make a second point that communicating from a place of curiosity rather than assumption or emotion is really important. So we often communicate emotionally to our partners. I am so mad at you because, I'm so frustrated at you because. And we learned a long time ago that I feel statements are important. But when we lead off with our negative emotions, what that can do is really trigger our partner into feeling attacked. And so when we can come from curiosity or from directly stating what we need and how it would make us feel positively to do the right thing instead of the wrong thing, that can be really effective. So you notice in the example that I gave you, I came towards this conversation with, here's what makes me feel good, and I'm curious if we can do this more or make it more of a regular part of our relationship. That comes across entirely differently than, this thing you do makes me feel really bad, and I would like you to do less of that. Okay. So I need you to understand that it's hard for a lot of individuals to have a mental picture of what not doing something is. But it's easier to formulate a mental picture of what doing something is. Okay. It's easier to formulate what I should do versus what I should not do in terms of my own mental picture in my mind's eye. And so, just like telling children, hey, sit your butt on the couch, couches are for our butts, it is better to tell our partner what to do instead of what not to do in a non critical way. So, if it's our child, instead of saying, stop jumping on the couch, it's, hey, can you sit on your butt? That's what couches are for. We want to do the same thing with our partner, but in a more loving, less parentified way. So, if you have a need, express it towards the positive. We could say something like, hey, I feel really connected to you when we have dinner together without our phones. So I was wondering if we could make it a regular practice to put our phones up during dinner. How do you feel about that? That's going to come across so much better than, hey, every time we eat dinner, I feel disrespected and I feel alone because you are always on your phone instead of connecting with me. And I don't like that. I don't appreciate it. And I would really like you to put your phone away. Again, we are painting a picture of what not to do, and we're telling how our partner just how awful they have made us feel. Now, it's really, really important that we don't self-abandon and we can communicate our feelings. But again, if we can communicate to our partner what we would like to feel instead of what we would not like to feel, that is actually more effective in getting them to be motivated to doing something different. It gives them a better mental picture, it doesn't trigger them as much, and it makes them motivated to change. So, it's important to remember that individuals, especially with an avoidant side, have somewhat of a spirit of rebellion. When they feel controlled or trapped or manipulated into doing something different, they almost do what you want even less because they're trying to resist the desire to be controlled subconsciously. So when we say, you need to do this, it makes me feel bad to do this, they're almost going to start doing it more or not doing what you need to do less. And that is subconscious. It's not a purposeful way to hurt you, but it's their subconscious wounds around being trapped, stuck, and controlled, rearing their ugly heads, and actually impacting or influencing their own behavior. So again, the avoidants have to take responsibility for that, to notice their own patterns and to work through feeling criticized, judged, or attacked. And you can also work on how you communicate in a non-critical way. Like I said before, it's also important to manage your assumptions inside of your relationship. So instead of telling yourself a really negative story about why your partner has done what they've done, why don't you just ask your partner in a curious and open way? So if your partner is always on their phone during dinner and you feel disrespected or unimportant, you may just be assuming that that's how they want to make you feel. Perhaps they're just struggling with managing their own time and managing their attention and their connectedness to their family. And so, why don't we approach that with a conversation that allows them to really tap into what's going on with them instead of immediately going into defense mode over feeling attacked, judged, and misunderstood? So instead of saying, hey, you're on your phone all the time and you just don't even want to be around us or engage with us, that's an assumption. We could say instead, hey, I've noticed that you're on your phone a lot during dinner, and I'm just curious what might be going on for you. If you're feeling overwhelmed or if you're feeling like you aren't able to connect because you have so much going on, I was hoping maybe you could tell me a little bit about that because it makes me feel really connected when we can kind of all be present during dinner. And I was wondering how you might feel about trying to implement that a little bit more in this relationship. So you notice that curiosity is a huge staple component of effective non-critical communication. We never, ever want to assume. Assuming is actually a way for you to feel like you are in control, like you understand someone's behavior, which means that you can react appropriately. But most of the time, our assumptions get us into trouble. Our partner is usually almost never trying to hurt us, with the exception of potential narcissistic behavior or fearful avoidants who feel like they have to level the playing field through creating pain in you, which is something that I have covered before. Those are two circumstances where your partner usually is intending to hurt you, but most of the time, your partner is not intending to hurt you. They are just not connected to you in that moment in a way that is making you feel good, and they're failing to notice that level of disconnection. And we need to be able to bring it to their attention in a way that's open and in a way that tells us what we would like to see instead of what you would not like to see. So, those are my two biggest components of non critical communication. We are going to get to listening with empathy in a little bit and how to minimize defensiveness, which can come off very critical as well. But in terms of asking for our needs to be met directly, we need to do so in a positive way, in a way that allows us to communicate what we do want to see instead of what we don't want to see. And we want to be curious and open instead of assuming about someone else's behavior or intentions. So I hope this video was helpful. I want you to keep these things in mind.